Okay, hello math fans. Alright, so today is factoring special products. Alright, so this is what a special product is. If you guys remember back in the day, we had problems like this. X plus 3 times x minus 3. And if you remember, that's kind of a special, right, when you FOIL, you actually just do x squared because these are opposites, right? Well, first of all, we have the x is the same and the 3 is opposite of negative 3, right? You have a positive and negative there. You can actually just do the first and the last, so x squared minus 9. Well, now what's going to happen is I'm going to give you x squared minus 9, and you're going to factor. And you're going to actually factor it, and you're going to turn it into x plus 3, x minus 3. All right, the way you recognize it, we call this a difference of two squares. All right, so let's actually look at all these terms that we just have here. We have three keywords. First of all, difference. Let's write this out again. X squared minus 9. So difference. It's got to be opposite sign. So one has to be positive. So notice this is positive here, and this is negative. So it's the difference between the two. So difference of, okay, there's the next one is 2. Okay, there's 2 terms. And then squares. Both of these, that term and that term, have to be perfect squares. Okay? That's actually how you recognize that. The first thing that I would look at is that there are 2 terms. Okay? If there are 2 terms, then I would see if there's opposite signs. So if there's a minus sign between them, or if you had to rearrange it, as long as one sign is negative and one sign is positive, that's the next thing. And then the third thing is, are they perfect squares? Okay, x squared is a perfect square, 9 is a perfect square, so that makes it a difference of 2 squares. And then the way you factor that is you're going to put 2 parentheses like you do even with a trinomial. And again, remember, this is what we're going to actually get. You're taking the first thing you do is you're going to put a plus and a minus in between there. Okay, for the signs, and then you're going to say, okay, what's the square root of x squared? Well, that's x and x, so you're going to put x in the first term. And then what's the square root of 9? So the square root of 9 is 3. So you're going to put a 3 here and a 3 here, and you're done with the problem. That's all you do. But the key here, math fans, is you got to be able to recognize a difference of 2 squares to actually factor it. Okay, so I got a bunch more to do here. If I give you x squared minus 64. Okay, again, you should recognize perfect squares. You should recognize everything really through like 11 squared, 121, 12 squared, 144. If you're not sure, you can type in your calculator and take the square root to see if it is a perfect square. All right, so first thing, it's got 2 terms. Okay, that's good. Second thing, are the signs opposite? Yep, the x squared's got a positive sign, and the 64's got a negative sign. Okay, so that's good. And the third is, are they both perfect squares? Well, x squared is obviously a perfect square because it's x squared, and the 64, square root of 64 is 8, so that's a perfect square, so I can factor it. And that's something that you're going to talk about, you're going to think really quickly about it as opposed to having to write it out each time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, what's the square root of x squared? It's x and x. Oh, I didn't put my signs here, plus minus. Don't forget that. Square root of x squared is x and x, square root of 64 is 8 and 8, and we're done with the problem. See, it's really pretty easy as long as you recognize it. Okay, so let's try another one here. X squared plus 25. Alright, so it's got 2 terms, so that's good. It's got one's positive, one's negative. Oh, that's not true. Okay, they're both positive. And actually, if they're both positive or both negative, well, the negative we're going to get to later. But if they're both positive, that's it. You can't factor. Can't factor. And that's what you want to write on there. Can't factor. Okay, but you have to recognize that. And that is probably the #1 mistake that people make is that there's a plus sign, and they're like, oh, that's a difference of two squares, and they factor it as x plus 5 and x minus 5. Okay, because there is no way to factor x squared plus 25. And I know some of you might say, well, how about x plus 5, x plus 5? Isn't that x squared plus 25? But you guys, you should know it's not, because if I FOIL that, I get x squared plus 5x plus 5x plus 25. So I don't get just x squared plus 25, I get x squared plus 10x plus 25. Okay, so that you can't factor that one. Okay, let's try another one here. 9x squared minus 49. So the first thing, it's got two terms. That's good. This one's positive. The first term's positive. The second term's negative. That's good. And they are both perfect squares. Now this one's got a little bit more to it, but you should look at that 9 and say, oh, the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of x squared is x. That's good. Square root of 49 is 7. So that's perfect. And then what you're going to do is in your parentheses, you're going to write plus minus. And I actually did this already. That's 3x and 3x. And I did the square root of 49. That was 7 and 7. And that's your answer. 3x plus 7, 3x minus 7. Okay? It's really not that difficult, but you have to recognize all three parts. Okay? Two terms, opposite signs, and both terms are perfect squares. Okay, let's try another one here. 25y squared minus 64. Okay, definitely, again, you're going to recognize it much quicker as time goes on, but definitely you see 25 is a perfect square, y squared is a perfect square, 64 is a perfect square. There are two terms here, and one of them is negative, one is positive, so I can write out my parentheses. Always put plus minus in there. Just do that right away. And the square root of 25, y squared, so it's 5y and 5y. The square root of 64 is 8 and 8. And that's my answer. 5y plus 8, 5y minus 8. Okay, pretty easy. Let's try another one here. Let's see, 16x squared minus 81. Okay, definitely difference of two squares. Those are both perfect squares, and that's a perfect square. Two terms, and there's a minus and a plus. So the square root of 16 is 4. Square root of x squared is x, so 4x and 4x. Plus and minus. Square root of 81 is 9 and 9. Okay, what about this one? 81x squared plus plus 25, right? Even before you start the problem, they're both positive, so you can't factor. All right. What about this one? 25x squared minus 1. Now, people sometimes get confused by the 1. They're like, oh, well, it's got a 1 there. Well, you guys should recognize 1's a perfect square also, because the square root of 1 is 1. So, and it's a minus sign, so let's factor it. Plus minus, square root of 25 is 5, and then we got a 5x and a 5x, and then a 1 and a 1. Okay, that's it. Let's try one more down here. 36x squared plus 25. Merp, can't do it. Same sign, can't factor. Okay, gotta recognize that, math fans. If it's plus in between there, can't factor it as a difference of two squares. All right. Okay, so let's try a different kind of problem. This is actually a trinomial. We've done trinomials already now for a few days, but let's do a different type of problem. So if I have x squared plus 6x plus 9, and I ask you to factor that. Well, you're going to do what you did before. It's a 1 and a 1, and the 9 is a 3 and a 3, or a 9 and a 1. And then you're going to put your signs in here, plus, plus, and so I'm going to put x and x here. And just because, remember I told you, you usually don't use the extreme one, the 9 and the 1, especially if this is a smaller number. So I'll put a 3 here and a 3 here. And the only thing I have to check is the OI. So outside, 3x, inside plus 3x equals 6x. Beautiful, that's it, it's 6x. So that's actually my answer. Now this is why we call it a special product though, is because you need to recognize that that and that, they're the same. Okay, those are the same. So if they're the same, you write it as x plus 3. It's just like if I said x times x, right? You don't leave it as x times x. What do? Don't you write it as x squared? So if I have x plus 3 times x plus 3, it's the same thing, so I write it as x plus 3 squared. And that's your answer. Okay, that's actually easy. So this is only one additional step from what I taught you before with trinomials. You just, if you have the same, if these are the same, you write as whatever that is squared. That's really, really important. Okay, so that's, again, it's pretty easy to recognize. So here's another one. Factor 4x squared plus 12x plus 9. Okay, so we got a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 2 and 9 and a 1 and a 3 and a 3. Signs are both positive. So I'm going to use the middle terms. I said it was always a good idea to do that. So 2x and 2x. I didn't put the signs in. They're plus plus. And I'll put a 3 in and a 3 in. Okay, that gives me 4x squared. If I check it, oh, actually I don't have to check that, right? All I have to do is check the OI. So outside is 2x times 3 is 6x plus 6x equals 12x. Yep, beautiful. That's it. So write it twice here. So it's going to be 2x plus 3 quantity squared. Okay, so don't forget that, guys. If it's the same thing, write it as something quantity squared. Just like when I ask you to simplify this guy right here, the first thing you do is you write it twice, and then you FOIL it. Alright? So let's try another one here. 16x squared minus 8x plus 1. Well, that's kind of nice. That's 4 and 4, 8 and 2, and 16 and 1, and 1 is just 1 and 1. And remember, it's positive, so it multiplies to give you a positive, and adds to give you a negative, so it's got to be the same sign, negative, negative. We'll try 4x and 4x. And the 1 and the 1, it's got to be a 1 and a 1. So let's check it out. I get negative 4x minus 4x equals negative 8x. Beautiful. So my answer is 4x minus 1 quantity squared. Okay? So that's pretty much it, math fans. Two things I taught you are difference of two squares. And that's easy to recognize that. X squared minus 16. Two terms, opposite sign, and perfect squares. Okay, so that would be x plus 4, x minus 4. That's your answer. This one's actually called, and I never really gave it a title, but these are actually called perfect square trinomials. Perfect square trinomials. Because they are perfect squares, right? This is, I can write it like that, it's a perfect square. Because really, not that you need to know this, but if I did 4x minus 1 quantity squared, and if I took the square root of that, I would just get 4x minus 1. It's a perfect square. Okay? So that's it, math fans. I hope you learned a little bit more about special products, and have a nice day. Goodbye.